All right, so characterization part 3. That ladybug means something. Okay, we have been looking at characterization for our last couple of classes. So let's review a little bit. Okay, the first thing we looked at were the 3 aspects of characterization: the physical, emotional, and psychological traits. And when we are using adjectives to describe our characters, we want to be as precise as possible. We don't want to limit ourselves to like 1 or 2 descriptors, because people are more complex and we would expect characters in good literature to be more complex. We don't want to rely on synonyms. We don't want to say she's nice, she's kind, she's friendly. Those all mean the same thing. We want to pick one of those and then try and find another aspect of the character to describe. Then we looked at where we would find out information about our characters. How do we know who they are? And so we use the acronym STEAL. For the S is for says, what dialogue, what does the character say? The T is for thoughts, what does the character think? The E is for the effect on others. How do others talk to or about or react to this character? The A is for actions, what does this character do? And the L is for looks. How is this character described? What does their appearance look like? And that's how we get information about the characters. Today, we're going to talk about perspective. And perspective is how we view the world, how we perceive it. And that is unique to each of us, just like it'll be unique to each of the characters. All of us have different backgrounds and life experiences that create this filter that we look at the world through. My filter is that of a white 45-year-old woman living in Texas, divorced mom. All of these things are part of my filter and how I view the world. I am 100% sure that you guys have different filters, right? You're not a white 45-year-old English teacher. You are something else. So those experiences and backgrounds that we come from give us that filter to look through our world. And our job is to try and see what the character's background and experience and environment, what all of that stuff is, so that we can figure out kind of how the character is looking at the world. Okay, so there's a new acronym, which is BETTER. Thank you, Durga. B-E-T-N-R. So B is for background, E is for environment, P-T is for personality traits, and then R is for relationships. So we're going to add this to our interactive notebook. And so the way you do that is you go to your Google Drive. So I'm in my Google Drive and I'm going to type in the word interactive because I know that's what I've named it. And I am looking for Mrs. Ritchie's AP Lit interactive notebook. When I find it, because that's what I've named it, it'll come up. And so here we are. So I want you guys to go find your interactive notebook and pull it up so we can add these notes to it. If you're using a hard copy notebook, grab it because you're going to add this acronym to it. And the way I get my interactive notebook to work is I move into present mode. So I will click present. I have to scroll forward 1 page, and then these tabs become active. So I will click analysis, and here I am at my character notes. I'm going to skip forward a page. And yesterday, last class, we did steal. Today, we are going to do better. B-E-P-T-R. For background, environment, personality traits, and relationships. So I will leave this up for you guys to copy into your own interactive notebook. You do not need to have these squares at the bottom, but you certainly can if you would like. So I'll give you guys a few minutes to copy that down. Let me know if you need help getting there. Okay, does anybody need more time?
I think I need more time. It's because my internet is being like really, really slow.
Mine too. Okay, I will give you a little bit more time, Stephanie.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
No worries. Okay, I'll put these slides up in the classroom in case you didn't get to write everything down so that you can still see what you need to have in your notebook. But let's go ahead and watch our next video. So we're going to go to the classroom video, and Carlos Escobar, Mr. Escobar, is going to walk us through how to do perspective. And we'll stop the video about halfway through and do a little activity, and then we'll finish it. So I'm going to mute myself and start his video.
After all, what might you say? You might say it's small. You might say it's spotted, it's pretty, it's tiny. But I want you to think about what this ant might say about the ladybug. Would the ant think that it's pretty? Could the ant even tell that it's spotted? And would the ant say that it's small or tiny? And what would we say about this ant? Would we say that this ant is tiny? Is it smaller than the ladybug? Or can you imagine the creature that stares into this face? Think about their perspective and how ferocious this ant seems to them because of how they are viewing the world. And when we talk about perspective, that's exactly what we're talking about. It's the way that we view the world. But what impacts that? What shapes perspective? Our background, our environment, our personality traits, and the relationships that we have all come together to give us the lenses by which we view and interpret the world around us. So let's practice this skill. As usual, I'm a fan of some sort of graphic organizer, some place for us to jot down our ideas. So I've given you 4 boxes, which you can quickly recreate on your own sheet of paper. And we've labeled them with the 4 categories: background, environment, personality traits, and relationships. Perhaps let's define these a little further. The background might be something about this person's socioeconomic condition, about this person's ethnicity or race, what time period are we looking at. Whereas environment might be, are we in a city? Are we in the country? Is it a rural setting? Again, what the historical framework might play a role in environment. Personality traits. Think about how a person who is shy views the world versus someone who's outgoing. How do they respond to the world around them? And finally, relationships. If you view yourself as a student, as a brother, as a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a husband, a wife, how do those titles that we take on or that are thrust upon us or that we impose upon ourselves, how do these things impact the world around us? And we're going to practice it with Mrs. Mallard. So we're going to return once again to Kate Chopin's 1894 short story, The Story of an Hour. And I don't want to hear you say that you've read this before. I want you to reread it for the exclusive purpose of populating these four boxes. I want you to think about the perspective that Mrs. Mallard has, and this is the way that she views the world again. And I want you to write down as many ideas as you can in each of these four boxes.
Okay, so I've put a link to the story because you're going to look at it again in the chat box. And then if you come under classwork in our classroom tab, you'll see perspective, Mrs. Mallard chart, and then something that's perspective with a question mark. I want you to go to the perspective Mrs. Mallard chart. You'll have to pull this up and you'll have to make a copy to be able to write on it, okay? You don't have permission to use this document. You have to make a copy and make it your own. So I'll go to File and I'll pull it down and I'll click Make a Copy. It looks like it's the fourth thing down under Share, New, and Open. And when I do that, I can make my own copy of it and then I can type in this document, all right? And so that's what I want you guys to do. Make a copy of it and then look at the story of an hour and what do you think her background is, her environment, her personality traits, what relationships does she have? And I'll give you guys about 5 minutes to look at the story and fill that chart out, maybe a little bit more, and then we'll watch the second part of the video. Okay, you guys can start wrapping up your thoughts. Even if you didn't get all 4 boxes filled out, that's okay. Hopefully you have an idea of how this document or thinking pattern works. Okay, does anybody want to share, or can I get one person to share what you put in one of the boxes? Like, what did you have for her relationships or her background? What's one thing you guys got?
I said that she used to have a husband for a relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And that would affect her perspective, wouldn't it? Both being married, being a wife, and then being not married, being a widow. Both of those would affect her perspective. So nice job, Daniel. Okay, let's keep watching the video. I'm going to mute myself and we'll finish this out.
To think about the perspective that Mrs. Mallard has, and this is the way that she views the world again. And I want you to write down as many ideas as you can in each of these 4 boxes. Once you are ready to continue, I want you to think about the words that you selected and where they came from. I want us to look at the textual evidence that you have focused on in your reading. These are 4 sentences that I have retrieved from the text. These aren't the top 4, the best 4. They're simply 4 that tell us something about her background. But if you selected 4 different ones, that's perfectly okay. And like I always tell my students, you're probably choosing better ones because you're trying to impress me, right? So let's read these 4 and let's think about how they inform the background, environment, personality traits, and relationships that make up the universe of Mrs. Mallard and therefore denote her perspective. This is talking about Richards, the friend, he had only taken the time to assure himself of its truth by a second telegram and had hastened to forestall any less careful, less tender friend in bearing the sad message. I went ahead and highlighted the key words in each of these quotes that I would use to populate the boxes shown above. The second quotation says, but she saw beyond that bitter moment a long procession of years to come that would belong to her absolutely. The third one is, there will be no one to live for. There will be no one to live for her during those coming years. She would live for herself. And the last one, it's the sister begging her to open the door. Louise, open the door. I beg, open the door. You will make yourself ill. So we get in this first one the idea that she is a friend, and we see that Richards um, takes some time to assure himself of the truth before telling her the message. So there are people surrounding her who are taking care of her. We might be able to say that. There's going to be years that would belong to her absolutely. See, this quote is interesting to me, not for what it says, but for what it insinuates. If there are years to come that would belong to her absolutely, what do we know about her background? What do we know now about her environment? What do we know about the years that came prior to this moment and how those years may have shaped her life if she was living for someone else? And this is reiterated in the third quotation I chose, where we're told that there will be no one to live for, that she would live for herself. Can we start populating now maybe some personality traits? Can we understand her background or her environment a little bit better because of these quotes? And ultimately, we have her sister saying, you will make yourself ill. Where we've read the story already, we know that she's not making herself ill. Inside of that room, she's whispering, free, body and soul, free. She, for the first time, feels alive and feels like there might be a future that might make her excited and happy. But yet, her sister, that relationship, tells us that. Mrs. Mallard is cared for, but perhaps in a way that she doesn't need caring, right? She's being maintained in this worldview, but it's a worldview that she has now surpassed. So how do we take these quotations and this information about her perspective and put it together in a paragraph? That's the ultimate goal. And
Okay, so I just want to check in with you guys and make sure that you're good. You get what he's saying here about how these different elements contribute to who she is and how she sees the world. I'm assuming that means we're good. So I'm going back to the video.
I want to share something I wrote, and I want to challenge you to do the same. I want you to take what I've done and maybe reproduce it for another character in the story. Take the husband, take Richard's, or take her sister Josephine, and see if you can figure out what their worldview is, what their perspective is based on the details in the text, and then formulate your own paragraph. What I have written is, Mrs. Mallard's perspective was defined by her role as Brentley Mallard's wife. She lived for him and for their marriage and never even considered what she wanted for herself. She had learned to walk through life as a wife and a sickly woman who needed to be cared for by her husband, sister, and friends. Slowly, as she comes to terms with what her husband's death means for her future, Louise realizes that she can now live for herself. She understands that her previous disquietude stemmed from adopting a myopic view of the world that didn't allow her to develop as an individual. Now, her glance can turn to blue skies, the birds, and the very elixir of life. She can now view the world through what makes her happy, but all of this is shattered when she learns that he is, in fact, alive. So, what should the takeaway be? First of all, the takeaway is that this is a great story and everyone should read it, right? But specifically, when it comes to perspective, we want to review the aspects of a character's background that contribute to how that character perceives his or her world. I want you to think about those four boxes that I talked to you about. And I want you to think about what drives the character to think, feel, and or act in a manner that he or she does. If you take these two questions and apply it to any character that you encounter, you're getting closer and closer to understanding their perspective, the way they view the world, and then you can start to analyze that character. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope to see you next time on AP Daily.
Okay, so this is what you're going to do. You are going to do the same thing for another character in the story. You can do Jennings, you can do Mr. Mallard, you can do, I think it's Josephine, Louisa's sister. And if you look at our Google Classroom, there's a question assignment. So if I go to our classroom, we see perspective and it's the question. So I want you to discuss the perspective of another character from the story of an hour besides Mrs. Mallard. And I have attached a perspective chart that you can use and then a copy of what Mr. Escobar wrote. Okay. So you don't need to copy it word for word, but if you want to see what a discussion of perspective would look like, here you go. And, just use those different elements, background, environment, personal traits, and relationships to make some analysis of what that character's perspective would be. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, if you don't, that's it. That's your assignment for today, and you've got about 15 minutes to get it done. If you, oh no, you've got like 25 minutes to get it done. If you do have questions, you can stick around. I'll be on here till 2:45, and then I have to go to a department meeting. So Stick around if you'd like, work on your own if you'd like, and we will apply this character discussion to a news story next week. Oh, wait, before you get off, you might have already gotten off. Keep thinking about your college essay, and if you'd like to start writing a draft of that, do it. All right, if you haven't finished your slides, go ahead and finish them. But if you have and want to get started writing, go ahead and get started writing. That's the other thing we'll be doing next week, but there's no harm in starting early. Okay, so that is it. That's all I have for you. This character paragraph, this analysis paragraph, and your college essay. So I hope you have a great meeting. I'm having the meeting. I hope you have a great weekend.
Hey, bye, Richie.
Bye.
I have a question.
Yes.